All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Steve Malzberg Show. And as we take to the air, we have breaking news. CNN reporting that a judge in Texas has struck down the ban on same-sex marriage. And this is what's happening all over the country, the will of the people being usurped by the judiciary, activist courts. And you're going to have, as a wind-up, unless the courts step in, higher courts step in, overturn this, and unless the Supreme Court weighs in, you're going to have a situation where state after state after state, the people will have voted to keep marriage between a man and a woman, and the courts are going to say no. And that's the route that this seems to be headed in. We'll talk more about that later on. We also have the Arizona bill on the desk of Jan Brewer, still waiting to be signed or to be vetoed, and she has until Friday to do that. Why is she taking so long? Well, she's under a lot of pressure from both sides, but probably a lot more pressure to veto, which I think is what she'll do. I don't know that she should do that, but she probably will. We're going to talk all about that in just about 5 seconds as we're joined by our friend Alan West.
The Steve Malzberg Show.
Should a Catholic priest be coerced into performing a gay marriage?
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
No.
Why not? It's an act of discrimination.
Because
it's licensed by the state.
Because he's practicing his faith. And to me, that is very, very different when you're talking about a non-profit religious secular church and someone representing that versus a public business that's actually utilizing taxpayer dollars to help sustain itself, pays taxes.
So in the same model,
could
should Massachusetts, Washington, D.C., and Illinois have outlawed Catholic adoption services?
Okay, a scene from Crossfire, ladies and gentlemen. L.Z. Granderson and Newt Gingrich as they go at it over the Arizona bill, which is still on the desk of the governor of the great state of Arizona, Jan Brewer. Will she sign it? Will she veto it? I don't know. Joining us now to talk about that and much, much more is former congressman and former colonel in the U.S. Army, the one and only Alan West. Hello, Alan.
Hello, Steve. How are you doing?
Good, good. My pleasure to have you. Okay, also we should point out the Allen West Guardian Fund. What is the Allen West Guardian Fund?
Well, the Allen West Guardian Fund is focused on supporting and endorsing 14 in this 2014 cycle, very strong conservative military and minority candidates at the federal and also the state level. We've already gotten behind Mia Love in Utah, Dan Bongino in Maryland, and Tom Cotton in Arkansas. We just had a recent endorsement of Shane Osborne out in Nebraska, who's running for Senate there. And so we have another round coming out in May. So we're trying to build up those underrepresented groups in the conservative movement.
Okay, that is great. And you could go to www.allenbwest.com to find out more about that, or the Allen West Guardian Fund.com. Okay, so this bill, you know, they're calling it the new Jim Crow. When in fact, it's a very simple bill to read, and if you read it, it's one page, and if you know the law in Arizona, everybody's saying, well, that means they're not going to serve gays food anymore and whatever. They don't have to. People could discriminate against gays now in Arizona, and it's not happening.
Yeah, I think that this is a bit of an overreaction, and I think because of the overreaction and all the attention that it's getting, you know, Jan Brewer probably is going to veto it. But if you go back and understand really where this emanates from, there are two cases. There was one case out in Oregon with a bakery, and there was one case in New Mexico with a portrait studio.
Right.
And in both of those cases, those owners of that business who had been serving, you know, gay customers before, and even the couple in Oregon, that they said, you know, we don't want to support, you know, making a cake for your, you know, lesbian marriage because we don't believe in that. And in New Mexico, it was a matter of the owner of the portrait studio not wanting to photograph the lesbian wedding because, as she said, she didn't believe in that. Now, they have taken this to a greater and grander degree to say that, you know, what people are trying to do, or, you know, ban gays from having services provided to them at certain business establishments because of their sexual orientation. That is not the case. I mean, this is really about those two cases. And when it boils down, you know, in both of those cases, these businesses lawsuits were brought against them because of this. And in the case of the bakery up in Oregon, they were pretty much so run out of business because the entire gay community jumped on them. Now, is that what we want to see happen to our small business owners? And I think that we run a very dangerous line when the government or the state starts to give preferential treatment of sexuality, of sexual behavior against a small business owner. This is not about telling people that they can't go to a certain restaurant or whatever. This is just saying that certain people may not want to participate in or support certain activities like these two cases where the marriages were occurring. And I think that, you know, it's got blown out of proportion in Arizona. Jan Brewer is going to veto it. But people should really pay attention to what those two cases were.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think Jan Brewer is going to veto it because of the economic pressure from people like the NFL. The Super Bowl is supposed to be there next year. And Apple and different companies, they're all saying you better not sign it. When in fact, the bill is, as I said, it's one page. You know, Rush Limbaugh has said that, you know, it's pressure from the gay, I'm paraphrasing him.
Yeah, it's absolutely so, and it's a very strong lobby group, and when it's only, I don't know, maybe 3 to 5% of the overall population. But like I said, I would encourage people to read and understand what happened in Oregon with that bakery and what happened with this the owner of the portrait studio that may end up going to the Supreme Court because you're starting to, you know, legislate sexual behavior against small business owners, and I think that's a very dangerous path. One thing that I want us to stop doing, I want people to stop saying that this is all of a sudden a new civil right, because that really does, it's a slap in the face to, you know, people like my parents who, you know, they knew what discrimination was being brought up in the 20s and the 30s and the 40s down in the deep south of Georgia. So I don't want to see us go down that path.
So you're saying that when people like Eric Holder call gay rights the civil rights fight of our time, and when people compare this law to Jim Crow, when people like Jesse Jackson and others compare Trayvon Martin to Emmett Till, when Rosie O'Donnell says she's the gay Rosa Parks, you say what?
That's sensationalism, and I think that we're talking about something completely different when you look at the struggles that the black community had to go through. You know, you're talking about lynchings, you're talking about poll tests, you're talking about literacy tests, the Ku Klux Klan, all of those type of intimidation measures. And let's be very honest, all those things did come from the Democrat Party, so it's very interesting to hear them now trying to ballyhoo this point as well.
Right. All right, let's talk about, sir, of course, the military cuts that our fine Defense Secretary outlined a couple of days ago, while at the same time in one breath saying the challenges we face are greater, the enemies are greater, the threats are greater. Here's where we're cutting, and in fact troop levels in the Army back down to pre-World War II levels.
No, this is incredibly dangerous. You know, Steve, let's look at history. After World War I, we drew down the military, and then what came next? World War II. As a matter of fact, the Army's first engagement with the German Army in North Africa, the place called Kazarine Pass, we were completely decimated. After World War II, we drew down the military, and the first engagement of the Korean War was Task Force Smith. They got completely decimated. As a matter of fact, they were using old bazookas to go up against brand new Soviet T-34 tanks, which the North Koreans had. There was a lesson in history, and the thing is that we need to have a military that's a deterrent. We need to have the right and proper force mix across the geographic areas of responsibility of CENTCOM, SOUTHCOM, PACOM, EUCOM, AFRICOM, so that we can meet these threats. You know, we're drawing down our Navy forces to the point of about 230 to 250 ships, but the oceans have not shrunk. You know, we have already, you know, people in the Army and the Marine Corps, our ground forces, they're doing 6 and 7 combat tours of duty, anywhere from 6 months up to a year, and yet we're going to, you know, draw that down even further. We're cutting back on family benefits, commissary benefits, veterans benefits. What message are we sending not just to our country, but what message are we sending to the world? Are we serious about national security? Are we serious about defense? Are we serious about the most important responsibility that the federal government has, which is to provide for the common defense? And I say this administration is not. This administration is focused more on domestic policies, which it creates and expands a welfare nanny state.
Yeah, no, okay, I couldn't agree with you more. Before we get to Marco Rubio, who just was so brilliant yesterday on the floor of the Senate in responding to Tom Harkin, who went down to Cuba with a bunch of Congress people and came back and sang the praises of Castro's Cuba, or at least what he thought he saw being Castro's Cuba. But I want to ask you, you have an event planned with Donald Trump coming up?
Yeah, on the weekend of the 22nd of March down here in South Florida over at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago. This is in support of the Allen West Guardian Fund. We're going to have an evening at Trump's Mar-a-Lago with him and also Greg Gutfeld from the 5 and Fox News Red Eye. He'll be down there. This will be his first book signing for his brand new book that is coming out.
Great. That's very exciting. Okay, now let me let you hear a little bit of Marco Rubio. This is, I believe, 32.
A few moments ago, the body was treated to a report from the senator from Iowa about his recent trip to Cuba. It sounded like he had a wonderful trip, visiting what he described as a real paradise. He bragged about a number of things that he learned on his trip to Cuba that I'd like to address briefly. He bragged about their healthcare system. Medical school's free, doctors are free, clinics are free. Their infant mortality rate may be even lower than ours. I wonder if the senator, however, was informed, number one, that the infant mortality rate of Cuba is completely calculated on figures provided by the Cuban government. And by the way, totalitarian communist regimes don't have the best history of accurately reporting things.
I mean, he went on to lay out the fallacy in everything that Harkin came back and praised. Harkin said, oh, you know, the healthcare system is so great and blah, blah, blah. And then he talked about the 4-tier healthcare system in Cuba where the people get the worst treatment possible and all the good doctors leave the country whenever possible. He talked about how Harkin said, oh, I didn't meet one person on the streets of Cuba that spoke ill of the United States. And he talked about how they only saw the people that the Cuban government let them see and they were told what to say. I mean, they're calling it his most brilliant moment on the floor of the Senate. It was about a 17-minute speech, and I just wish the whole world could see it. He also attacked Venezuela as well.
Well, this is what you have to understand. You know, the progressive socialists that we have here in the United States of America fully support progressive socialism wherever it is, in Cuba, in Venezuela, and they don't support those people that are standing up for liberty and freedom. And, you know, a lot of the things that you see enacted in Cuba, you know, state-run health care, that's exactly what they want to have here. And the standards of health care will go down, and doctors will leave that system. We're already seeing that happen here. When you look at what is going on in Venezuela, where you had nationalizing of production, of, you know, taking over of media, taking over the oil industry, you know, share prosperity, income equality, economic equality, fair share, all of those things that Hugo Chavez was touting. That's what Barack Obama is touting. And that's why you saw so many people leaving. The producers left Venezuela, and they're in western Florida, which is on the western part of Broward County, where you prominently see the Venezuelan flag flying. But the point is, where do Americans run to? Where do people run to when there is no longer a liberty beacon such as what we have offered here, a true land of prosperity, of individual success, of entrepreneurship and development? So, you know, it is just appalling that the Democrats have sold their souls out to something that has never been successful anywhere in the world, that is all about shared misery and not about prosperity.
And they'd love to see it here. Colonel Allen West and Congressman Allen West, friend Allen West, thank you, sir. Great to talk to you as always.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Take care. My pleasure. Allen West, ladies and gentlemen. And when we come back, the first panel of the day, John Fund, Newsmax contributor, and Christopher Hahn, Democratic strategist, will throw around all these great stories and issues and some of what Allen West had to say right here on the Steve Malzberg Show on Newsmax Television.
The Steve